Welcome back to another segment of Behind the Scenes of the Waltons. Today I'm going to be talking about the episode from Season 6, The Return, when John Boy comes back and convinces Mr. Guthrie to open the old coal mine. Olivia is worried about John, who is considering looking for work outside of Walton's Mountain. The shipyards are hiring because they are building more ships, and John is considering where he might need to go in order to make money. She writes to John Boy in New York. John Boy's concerned because Mama doesn't usually voice her concerns unless it's fairly serious. So, along with the agreement of his editor, he is sent back to Walton's Mountain to cover the economic impact in rural areas like Walton's Mountain and also what's happening in the shipbuilding areas by the sea. So, John Boy comes back, which for the cast was rather like a real reunion because Richard had left at the end of season 5 and I missed him. I think we all did. So when he returns and he walks up and we each see him and then he's telling us to be quiet because he wants to surprise Mama, it felt like real life when a relative comes back that you haven't seen in some time. So that was pretty special. Grandpa is feeling unneeded. There's not much work going on in the actual mill. Grandpa feels like he'd like to be doing something useful, but John keeps saying, no, basically you're too old and you shouldn't have to be working so hard, and I don't want you going off to look for work, and they wouldn't hire you, you're too old. So he's feeling pushed out and unwanted, unneeded. He ends up going up into the backwoods. He comes across Nurse Nora. This is about the third actress I remember seeing play Nurse Nora. In this case, she's riding a horse up in the backwoods, much like Mary Ellen does as she gets into more of her practical nursing up with the people in the backwoods. Nurse Nora mentions to Zeb that the main thing concerning her about many of the people up in the backwoods is not so much their physical ailments as their emotional needs, that they're lonely and that seems to be most what they need. Zeb takes that to heart and saddles up Blue. So you see him once again riding Blue, this time in a saddle, and off he goes to visit people who are isolated up there in the backwoods, and he finds himself very useful and very, very much needed up there in helping with the work and with raising the spirits of the people who live there. And you see a real transformation with this one couple that he spends a lot of time with. He visits regularly, and they come to anticipate and look forward to his visits for the company and the uplifting nature of just having somebody show up who cares. And it's a great message to us about those on the outskirts for whatever reason, and the way in which us reaching out can make such a difference in their lives, and even simple things that we do can really help raise someone's spirits. So I thought that was just a wonderful element of this episode, plus that it made Grandpa feel valuable, and so it kind of served both purposes. So lovely story point. Various aspects of filming this episode, including the bus going along the route. I believe that was shot at Franklin Canyon near the reservoir out there. And then we are at the Rockfish Bus Depot, once again, Western Street, which I have talked about. And then later on, we are at the mill, which was actually filmed on the studio lot at Warner Brothers. There's an area on the lot called the mill, where they, I guess, produce various different types of set pieces and things like that. And that was where we shot all those sequences outside the mill. Erin also has a subplot in this 2-hour episode. She seems to have some sort of a secret. John Boy comes back. He meets the new Reverend, in this case played by Peter Fox, Reverend Buchanan, who seems to know Erin's secret but isn't sharing. Feels that when Erin wants to tell John Boy, she will. The family's worried about her, Mama in particular, because she keeps coming home tired, late. Jason's been dropping her off and picking her up, but from Miss Fanny's, not from wherever she's working. Miss Fanny will not share, which is unusual because Miss Fanny is one of the queens of gossip around town. And when John Boy comes back and says, "Don't tell anybody yet," she immediately gets on the phone and starts telling people that John Boy's back. But she does keep Erin's secret. And ultimately we find out that Erin has been helping care for the children of a widowed man who has lost his wife and needs to go off to work someplace, needs someone to take care of the children, and Erin is doing that. But it is somewhat controversial because here he is a widow, she's a young unmarried woman, and she is in his home. Nothing's going on, but Olivia isn't so sure that she's comfortable with this, but Erin stands her ground. She's a grown-up now, and she's doing something that she thinks is important and valuable, and plans to continue to do it. Recognizing how much work is needed on the mountain and how few resources there are, John Boy wonders about the old coal mine, the Guthrie coal mine that's been closed down for some time, about 5 years, I believe. He goes to visit Mr. Guthrie, played by actor Lloyd Nolan, who had you'll recognize him. He did so much work over the years. And Verdi is working for him as well. So John Boy and John go to see him and convince him that coal is needed and that perhaps he can be supplying some of the shipyards that are in need of coal. So he agrees and signs a contract with John, basically a handshake contract with John, to supply all the lumber and do the shoring up of the mines to make it safe for the miners to come in and once more, resource the coal. When John and John Boy go out to check out the mine, Elizabeth tags along. She mentions that she has spent a lot of time wandering around and exploring this area, so while they go below ground to check out just what's going to be needed to shore up the mine shafts, Elizabeth goes wandering, ends up falling in a mine shaft and down a hole, and they rescue her. She's not injured, but it does become a story point later on when the men are working and the mine does cave in and the men are all trapped. Many of you have asked how that was shot, the mine cave in. Since I was not on set for the mine cave in, all of the women were above ground basically. They arrived when the whistle is pulled and come to be whatever support they can above ground, helping find the blueprints so that Epp and John Boy can figure out how to get to the men that are trapped. And the women are there ready to supply food and water and blankets and comfort and be there for each other, emotional support. But I called Eric and I said, "Hey, you were in the mine. How was this done?" I mean, I had my own ideas, and as a director, I will look at some of those things and think, well, if I had to shoot this, how would I shoot it? And it sounds an awful lot like some of my ideas were actually used, so I felt pretty good about that. Eric said they built a interior set on another soundstage, not stage 26, but one of the other sound stages that we sometimes used at Warner Brothers. And he said they built all of the interior of the mine shafts. He said, which was interesting because they had ceilings. They were closed in, which wasn't typically the case when they built sets. They would leave the ceilings open so that they could put lights up above and rig things that way. But in this case, because we see the ceilings of these mine shafts, they were closed in and not terribly high because these men were not clearing the roof, the ceiling of that mine by very much. So he said that when they did the cave-in, the things that were falling on them were, he doesn't remember if it was actually dirt or some other, substance that looked like dirt. He said all the pieces of beam and rock that fell on them were styrofoam. So things were falling on them, but none of it was hard substances. And I said, I had the sense that, most of the heavy dirt that you see falling is closer to camera. And you see through this layer of dirt that's falling, and you can see the men past that and other things hitting them. So what it looks like happened is that they, dumped a lot of dirt very close to camera. So that in the foreground, you saw just a ton of dirt falling. And through that, you were filtering and seeing the men beyond that and them dodging things and responding to being hit by things and being knocked down. So that was how they filmed the actual cave-in. And then, of course, when the men were being rescued and being uncovered from the dirt, they were just covered with dirt. And Eric said, yeah, nobody's face was covered. But, so by the time you kind of saw people digging them out, it wasn't really on their face. So their body might have a layer of dirt on it, but they were safe and able to breathe and things like that. So then they filmed all of that, moving people around and dragging them, propping them up against the dirt and all of that. And where they had created that, he said they just brought in a ton of dirt onto the set. And then, they were kind of packed in and leaning up against it and stuff like that. And obviously a similar thing with the tunnel where Epp and John Boy, and then ultimately when they find the other shaft that Elizabeth fell down, and they're really digging through there thinking that they're now past it and can come in to them from the other side. They had created another piece of the set where they could be, moving dirt, and that would have been something where there were not people on the other side of it until they needed to get that connecting shot. And then they would have put those pieces together. So that was how the actual mine cave-in was done, to the best of my and Eric's understanding. Hope that was helpful. I really enjoyed how they did the end of this episode. You see John Boy sitting alone in the kitchen. It's dim. It's dark. He's making notes. And the goodnights start. You hear the voices calling from other parts of the house. And you actually see John Boy respond
good night,
and say
Boy.
goodnight.
Good night, Daddy.
That didn't happen very often, but I thought it was a very fitting ending to this episode, and seeing John Boy returning to Walton's Mountain once again. If you're enjoying these, please do hit like and subscribe, and the notification bell if you want to know when I'm doing another episode. That's what I have for you for this segment of Behind the Scenes of the Waltons, the episode from Season 6, The Return. I'll be back with more Behind the Scenes of the Waltons and more Ask Judy. Thanks for watching.